Bora pedir logo 99? Daqui a pouco o show já vai começar.
Tô pedindo aqui já.
Pede e já negocia, hein?
Negocia? Ué, como assim?
99 negocia, ué. Agora a gente pode negociar com os motoristas parceiros da 99, direto pelo aplicativo.
Mentira! Que babado! Para negociar o preço da sua corrida, a 99 é o melhor negócio. Tenha corridas com mais autonomia e segurança. Experimente o 99 Negocia hoje mesmo. Abra o app e confira.
We're here to entertain you. We'll sing your songs for good times, the best times. You can't go wrong. We'll two-step, a new step. It won't be long when the Dixieland's are playing. Soon you'll be swaying, so come on, sing along.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Before My Time. I am your host, Gelsey Laurie, and this week we will be talking about the infamous criminals, Bonnie and Clyde.
Bora pedir logo 99? Daqui a pouco o show já vai começar.
Tô pedindo aqui já.
Pede e já negocia, hein?
Negocia? Ué, como assim?
99 negocia, ué. Agora a gente pode negociar com os motoristas parceiros da 99, direto pelo aplicativo.
Mentira! Que babado! Para negociar o preço da sua corrida, a 99 é o melhor negócio. Tenha corridas com mais autonomia e segurança. Experimente o 99 Negocia hoje mesmo. Abra o app e confira.
If you like music and you like podcasts and you like to laugh and you like to learn, you need to immediately subscribe to One Hit Thunder. Each week on the One Hit Thunder podcast, we dive deep into the story and back catalog of a one-hit wonder band or artist. From there, we have a good, healthy discussion as to whether they brought the one-hit thunder or were nothing more than a one-hit wonder. We have a huge back catalog, and we've done episodes on everything from Don't Worry, Be Happy and the Macarena to King of Wishful Thinking and Cumbersome. I promise you're going to love the show more than Jaquan loved getting tipsy, and even more than Bobby Boris Pickett loved making alternate versions of the Monster Mash. Subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Gelsey.
Yes.
We got a couple. This was a weird one. So we stumbled into realizing that we have an anniversary of the movie Bonnie and Clyde on the horizon. Very important movie. It's I believe it's that movie and Easy Rider, kind of the two big ones that are cited for like the starting of the MPAA rating systems all over again. But also, you know, do we want to talk about this movie, which is a great movie, or do we want to get even more historical and just talk about the real life Bonnie and Clyde? Because as much as we love this movie, not exactly the most historically accurate film that's ever been produced.
It is not. And so we are actually going to dive into the historical real figures of Bonnie and Clyde. Because if you said we were doing the movies, I was going to cry because I have about like 6 pages here just of crazy in-depth notes. And I'd be I hate you, Matt.
No, let's talk about Bonnie and Clyde. You did all this research, and I know basically the movie and not much else about Bonnie and Clyde. So I think you're going to teach me some stuff today.
Oh, good. I like a good teaching moment. All right. We got Bonnie and Clyde. Most of you might know, some of you might not know, they were a very notorious criminal couple in the early 1930s. Bonnie was really famous for her cute little beret she wore, got that in fashion and style, and their Tommy guns kind of, you know, I think most people think of them as like the typical late 20s to 30s gangsters that robbed banks, and that is not necessarily true. They did rob banks, but very few. They mainly robbed gas stations, small shops, and individual people. And that's, you know, it was kind of, that's the glorified movie version, is like, yeah. Put them up, put your hands up, kind of a thing. So anyways, Bonnie Parker was born in 1910 in Rowena, Texas. So her background is kind of a shaky one, which no surprise there. Her father died when she was 4 years old, and she married a man named Roy Thornton 6 days before her 16th birthday in 1926. She never actually divorced this man, and when she died, spoiler alert, she dies, with Clyde, she still was wearing Roy Thornton's wedding ring. But they split in 1929, and she never saw him again. They just never divorced. She married him for stability, and he went into a life of crime. And she was like, bye. So, which is ironic.
So
then
she could go and do a life
So
of
she
crime.
goes and goes into crime herself. Exactly. That's how it works. They didn't have therapy back then, so it didn't work through things. What would the world be like if Bonnie and Clyde went to therapy?
Can I ask you a question while you're building this up? Because this is a big thing that I'm curious about out the gate.
Let's go.
In your opinion, I feel like Bonnie and Clyde have become these idolized anti-hero folk people.
Romanticized.
People will think of Bonnie and Clyde the same way they think of like the Joker and Harley Quinn, or like a Morticia and Gomez Adams, like a very morbid version of pure love. In your research and what you're about to teach us, do you think that you are going to further drive that narrative, or absolutely destroy that narrative, or somewhere in the middle?
Somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Because the love you can't deny. I mean, they were till the end next to each other and did it all the way through. And so, yes, but I think like any criminal that we romanticize in general, we can look back and
their crimes are way worse than we think about.
The mobsters, there's some kind of romantic notion to them because they are back in history. But when you dive into like really what was going on, you're like, fuck them. Like, so I mean, it's
that's
like
kind of what I
they're
figured.
Bonnie and Clyde and they killed a lot of people and wreaked havoc. So it's like, fuck them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's what I was expecting.
Yeah. Interestingly enough at the time, and I will get into this later, but even during their run, while they were out on the run, the public, they were celebrities and the public idolized them and romanticized them even as they were out doing the crimes of act. And it wasn't until one of the crimes, and they kind of got publicized in a certain way with one of the murders, that then the public started to turn and be like, oh, wait a minute.
So did people know what they looked like? Like,
oh yeah.
Like
oh yeah.
So like they could walk down the street and people would be like, yay, Bonnie and Clyde.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that did happen a few times. Like depending on where they were at, because they were in more rural. I can't say, never can say that word. Rural.
Rural.
That's like one of those, like, put grapes in your mouth and say it 10 times. And now I'm Eliza Doolittle. Rural. Okay. Anyways, I'll get into that. Yeah. But Clyde Barrow was born in 1909. So he's a year older than Bonnie. And he was born in Eli's Country, Texas. He was raised like in the slums. Him and his family were in a wagon and lived under the wagon until they could afford a tent. And then they moved into a tent. So they are poverty of povers. And he immediately kind of went into a life of petty theft, petty crime, just because, you can't blame the kid.
Yeah.
Boys got to eat. Him and Aladdin, Yeah.
Riff rat, street rat.
Exactly. Anything I can't afford, I steal. That's everything. Okay. So he was in and out of jail from age 17. Don't laugh at me, Matt. He was sent to prison by age 21. He had already, at this point, I'm kind of going to timeline bounce around, but he had already met Bonnie at this point, like just met Bonnie, and then he gets sent to prison. His first time he got sent to jail was actually for not returning a rental car. So got to get to that Hertz, get that car back, you'll go like Clyde. But he was sent to prison in 1930 at the age of 21. And one of his fellow inmates said he saw him go from a schoolboy into a rattlesnake. Like that's really where that shift happened for Clyde, where he was a little more innocent and kind of nice, but he was sexually assaulted in prison, which it got so bad that he snapped and he killed his tormentor with a metal pipe that he had snuck in. And that was his first murder.
And that's, I mean, we very much try to not get political on this podcast, but I mean, that is a big reason why people are pushing back against maybe we shouldn't put people for petty crimes in bad jails, because you're not teaching them the evils of smoking weed. You're teaching them how to be a worse person.
At least I'm not going to dive into like our criminal system and the prison system and blah, 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 because also I'm not very educated on what's going on exactly now. So I don't feel proper to talk about it, but I will say that I think there is more of a push and inclined way to the attempt is to better and teach and rehab.
Yeah, as opposed to just shove a bunch
There's
of
actually
people
therapy.
in a room.
There might be yoga. Well, at this point, this is 1930. The whole point of the prison system literally was to break a man. Like they would put them to the hardest labor. They just wanted to break them down. He kills his tormentor in prison. Luckily, another inmate that was in for life took the blame. So got to make friends on the inside. Yeah. I thought that was kind of oddly cool of that person, even though he got away with murder. I was like, oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Get this, to avoid hard labor, because it was like really bad. And he's like, I'm not going out in those fields in the sun and doing this. He cut off his own big toe and part of his second toe so that he wouldn't have to do that. And then fucking 6 days later, his mom comes and is like, I got you on parole. You're released.
Oh, no.
And so for the rest of his life, Clyde walks with a limp. Man, if Alanis Morissette could rewrite her ironic song, she'd be like, it's like Clyde cutting off his big toe, then getting out of prison 6 days later, yo.
Yeah,
Look at that.
That is...
I just weird out the fuck out of that
Weird
song.
out the shit out of that. Man. So... I'm thinking
we haven't even gotten to I've just gotten Bonnie and Clyde born, and I'm already going off on tangents.
This is insane, but I think there's a Garfield comic that I think about all the time. Where Garfield walks past John with a television set and a hammer and nails, and then he hears the sound of hammering, and then John walks into Garfield's little bed area, and he's laying on the bed, but he's nailed the television to the ceiling, and he says, you put in an exceptional amount of work to be that lazy. And that's kind of how I'm feeling right now about Clyde. You know how much work and
toughness,
pain?
He's definitely not on any painkillers like that. Not only are you doing this in 1930 where you might die cutting off.
How bad was the labor to cut off your own?
Obviously pretty bad, Matt. It's pretty bad.
God, I'm one of those people that it's oh my God, if you have to amputate any body part, just kill me. I can't.
Right? No, it's those films when they show you in the old timesy days where they're we're going to do this medical thing. And they're like, here, bite down on this leather strap. I'm are you?
Yeah,
that's where I'm I love living alive now. I'm thank God we have drugs. Drug the shit out of me. I get a cavity and I'm what do you got?
Yeah, give me the strongest stuff you have.
What do you got?
And they're this is a flu shot.
Drug me.
So he gets out on parole.
So he's out on
He's
parole.
Got his limp.
So
he's got his gal.
He's got his gal. He's there. So I'm going to backtrack slightly right before he goes into prison. Is the first meeting, January 5th, 1930. Whoops. Bonnie is 19, Clyde's 20, and they meet. They meet at a friend's house, kind of a mutual. Bonnie was staying with a friend who was a woman who I think had broke her arm, and she was there helping nurse her while she found work. They immediately are smitten with each other and fall in love. So they join together in 1932. Once he gets out of prison, they begin robberies, mainly, like I said, stores, gas station. Bonnie even gets caught and serves a few months in jail, which she spends her time. Get this? She's a poet. Bonnie writes poetry. Yeah. And this is actually something that got them on the map and kind of made them famous, was her poetry that was found at one point while they were on the run. They actually kind of form a posse, a gang. So they were known as the Barrow Gang, which is Clyde's last name. A lot of people, we think of just Bonnie and Clyde, but it was a whole gang. See?
Yeah.
August 5th, Clyde, there was a man named Raymond Hamilton and Ross Dyer, who were Clyde's friends, were drinking moonshine at a dance in Oklahoma, as one does. Mm-hmm. And Sheriff C.J. Maxwell and Deputy Eugene Moore approached them because they're obviously, and also, ladies and gentlemen, this is during Prohibition, no drinky drinks. So a lot of bootlegging going on. And so that's, but they approached them, and Clyde and Raymond opened fire, killing the sheriff and wounding the deputy. This is the first law officer that the gang killed. In total, they killed 9. So this is their first shoot down with the law. And they're like, ooh, that feels good. I'm guessing because they kept fucking doing it. So 1933, Buck, who's Clyde's brother, and his wife Blanche joined the gang. Also at some point, W.D. Jones, who's a childhood friend of Clyde, joins the gang in 1932. So that's their main posse is Jones, Buck and his wife Blanche, and then Bonnie and Clyde. They were once all of them were together playing, I forget where they were. Oh, in Joplin, Missouri. They're in a quiet neighborhood in a house, and they're playing loud card games. There's alcohol. Again, it's Prohibition. There's a lot of hooligans, people in and out. And so they were reported to the cops for suspicious behavior. And the Joplin Police Department goes thinking it's bootleggers. So they're like, haha, we got somebody. 5 officers go. The Barrow brothers and Jones open fire. They kill Detective Harry L. McGinnis and fatally wound Constable J.W. Harriman. Are you getting this, everybody? We're having a pop quiz at the end. I'm just throwing out names. You all are like, we don't care. More police officers die. There we go. They do get away. I love this. Blanche, actually, they all managed to get in their cop cars. I think that's the one. There is a bullet that grazes Clyde, but it bounced like ricochets off a button. So keep those shirts buttoned. It could save your life. Blanche runs off because her dog Snowball runs away, and she's like, Snowball. So she goes off. The gang gets in the car, runs off. They find Blanche, pick her up. Snowball's fucked. They don't find the dog. But I just like this. There was like an eyewitness of that, and I love this whole like fire out shooting, and then this like I imagine this tiny little white dog like running off,
just
and then
yapping its way.
the woman's like just ignoring the fact that everyone, her husband, they're all in crossfire, and she's like, my dog.
It's like a Mr. Magoo sketch. Like,
You literally, like, that's what I love about going into history and then being such a big fanatic of cartoons and entertainment and whatnot. You read things that actually happen and you're like, oh, I get where this material came from.
I get where these...
Like, this is all real.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, it's not funny. People died, but...
It's been long enough. I have a rule. Like, if it's over, I was going to say 40 decades. If it's before my time, I'm allowed to laugh a little.
I think that's fair.
There we go. If it happened before my time,
most of the victims are no longer with us, I think it's okay.
Then I'm going to baha a little bit and take the piss out of it. Because, again, coping with humor, it's super healthy. I don't know if it is.
You know, you could be Bonnie and Clyding it out there to cope with your issues.
It's either you laugh or you Bonnie and fuck the Clyde out of your shit. So I think my therapist is happy to hear that I'm laughing.
Yes.
Yeah, so they get away, they fuck the dog, get Blanche, but because they have to get away so fast, they leave away all their possessions. And when the cops go in and find there's a bunch of guns, blah, 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 they find a poem by Bonnie and undeveloped film left. So Bonnie was a huge romantic of it herself. She loved the film stars of that time. She would write stories and write herself in as the star and whatnot. And they did develop the film, and the most notorious famous photos of Bonnie and Clyde were these photos that they found. And Bonnie they kind of set up the camera, and I guess it's like a oldie timesy selfie maybe. Maybe Blanche took it. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, or someone took it for them.
She's dicking around with Snowball at this point. So maybe it was her husband. But anyways, there's a really famous photo of Bonnie pointing a gun at Clyde. It's a black and white. I know if I showed you, I'll put him on the Facebook group.
I know.
Which I feel like I say that a lot, and then I don't put Dick on the Facebook group. I'm sorry, guys. Just
I got our Instagram.
Yeah. You know what? I do post a little bit there. But okay, anyways. So the most famous pictures you've ever seen of Bonnie and Clyde is Bonnie pointing a gun at Clyde, and this was like to help the story or whatever. They were just playing pretend. And then there's the most famous picture of Bonnie with a cigar in her mouth, holding a pistol. And she never smoked cigars, actually. That was just for the photo. But those pics were sent to the press because at that time, it was like, stop the presses, extra, extra. So the Barrow Gang is front page news across the nation, and it blows up. People saw a strong woman. They saw a woman, smoking a cigar, taking life into her own hands. And it put much of the public in awe. This is a time that, don't forget, folks, we're in the Great Depression. And so Uncle Sam is, in their eyes, fucking over the poor, and no one can get help, this, that. And so it's like they were all from a region that was known as the Dust Bowl. And that's because these massive dust storms at that time would happen in this area and would cause drought, dead cattle, failed crops. And so the rural folks, damn it, I hate that word. Why would I put it twice in one podcast? They were desperate. And so it's like, that's where they come from, those people. So it was kind of this almost like Robin Hood story that these people were seeing, that they're taking what they deserve. And people, I don't think, realize that they were actually going off after civilians sometimes too, but they would take hostages and sometimes release them and give them money to get back home if they took their car. And then sometimes they'd be like, you're in my way, boom, dead. But there was a poem they found with these photos that she wrote called The Story of Suicide Sal, and it was in the press, and this is how the first refrain goes. I left my old home for the city to play in its mad, dizzy world, not knowing how little of pity it holds for a country girl. I mean, snaps for Bonnie.
Yeah.
That was a good little poem there. So she, they're writing this kind of narrative, and that's what the public takes in. And they are totally romanticizing the crime and everything. It's not only do they see that they're taking their lives into their own hands, turning away from Uncle Sam, but then also kind of this love story gets put on display where people think it's like, God, even through all this, they're sticking together. And as Rihanna would say, they found love in a hopeless place. So that's a bop. I love that song. It's about Bonnie and Clyde. We found love in a hopeless place. In the Dust Bowl. Hey, found love in a hopeless place. No big toes.
I did not expect the Bonnie and Clyde episode to be our most musical in a while, but
I didn't either. It's just coming to me. You know what? It's one of those days, Matt. And yes, so Rihanna, where were we?
Is that in your notes?
That's
You're like, where is Rihanna in my notes?
Where's Rihanna? No, I'm just trying to. Yeah, it says small jobs. They, even though I said, they were on the run. They were just robbing left and right, getaway cars here and there. If someone got in their way, they're going to shoot them dead. Even though sometimes they let people go, but you're mostly going to be dead. They always got away when they were pursued by the police, though. And their getaway car was a Ford V8, which had way more horsepower than all the police cars. So they always had their, I bet now it would be like 20 miles per hour. It's all,
oh yeah, it's probably
actually, I think at one sighting it said they were going 70. So
holy shit!
I know, good for you, Ford V8. Should have had a V8. Come on. What a dope ass car though, and they stole a lot of weapons from the National Guard armories, so they kind of always just had weapons. Clyde's favorite was the Browning automatic rifle, if you wanted to know that. And let's see. Okay, so this is funsy. One day they're like in their little getaway car and they're going, and he misses like an obstruction. They end up getting into a really bad car wreck. And everyone gets injured, but Bonnie gets like fucked. She suffers the worst, 3rd-degree burns on her leg so bad that her bone was showing.
Ugh.
So yeah, I know. I was like, God. So then this is fun. She walks for the rest of her life with a limp. So they're just two little limping lovers.
Twins.
Two little limping lovers. Come on now. So they say opposites attract. Not in this case. But they had to obviously get away like immediately. So they escaped into a farmhouse. Bonnie's going through it. She's like, I'm in agony because like we already said, no drugs.
Yeah.
And they're like, we need to get her provisions and medicine. So they kidnap a sheriff and marshal to try to do that. Doesn't go as planned. The marshal gets killed. They have to flee again, and they go to the Red Town Cavern in Platte City, Missouri. So she's still like, ow, my leg. And they're like, let's get away. They stay there. They get beer, food. They're nursing Bonnie, and they would go out for meds. And the drugstore owner, and the cavern owner, they both reported them because I think with the cavern owner, they said like 2 people checked in technically to the reservation, and then they saw like 5 walk in. And Bonnie and Clyde are already kind of known. The pictures are out in the press. And
so they'd use the rest
Bonnie
of the gang.
has like a wounded leg, and they're like, something doesn't seem right. And then they had been by other states kind of warned, like if people are out on the look for certain, for meds, that's the supplies they're going to be going for. So the drugstore owner called the cops and was like, I think Bonnie and Clyde are here. But their daily lives got more difficult. Like years later when Blanche got captured, in reports, she said, she was like, it was not an easy time, and it wasn't as, obviously it's not glamorous. You're always on the run, but they couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't go to hotels. Partly there was a phase of the celebrity, but then also they're like wanted. So you can't just be like, hi. So they spent a lot more time like camping out, cooking over fires. They'd have to bathe in streams. And like, you're talking to someone that's like, camping? Ew. Yeah. No, thank you. I will take the hotel and restaurant for $300. Thank you. So they end up going camping in Dexfield Park, which is an abandoned amusement park near Dexter, Iowa, on July 24th. Their last getaway that brought them here, Buck got shot in the head and ricocheted like off his bone. So didn't kill him, surprisingly, but he's got a brain injury. No shit. And let me tell you about brain injuries, Matt. No, I'm not. Yeah. For all of you who don't know, I have suffered really bad concussions in my life, and fuck that.
Yeah, just check out all of her previous appearances on other podcasts that I've produced.
My God.
If you want full breakdowns of that.
Yeah, I do go into my concussion recovery zone. Check them out. Side note, there are literally some episodes of this podcast, like almost a year ago that we recorded, which is crazy, a year ago. And some of them I'm like, I don't remember recording that because I was like, but good for me for pulling it together. Anyways, so locals noticed bloody bandages and they're like, we suspect the Barrow gang. And they were right. What does that say? So this is funny. When I was doing some of these notes, I was getting a pedicure and I was in the massage chair. So I was writing and I scribbled. I was like, this is a bad idea.
The glamorous life of Gelsey.
Called authority. Oh, they called the authority. They suspected the gang and they called the authority. Duh.
The stuff that I keep in.
I know. I'm like, fuck you. Okay, at this, the authority comes and they're at this amusement park. So Bonnie, Clyde, and Jones escape. Buck gets shot in the back and him and Blanche get captured. I don't know what the fuck Blanche is doing. Like, she doesn't have a dog to chase off of. She needs to get her shit together. Like, they should have dropped her cities ago because obviously this bitch is a problem.
I was gonna say Blanche is clearly the Kenny of this South Park gang. Like,
seriously, and like with a name like Blanche, like, you know, you're like, oh, and we gotta bring Blanche because she's married to Buck. Like, Blanche is keeping us up again. Like, gosh, come on, Blanche, get your shit together and get in the gang. But Buck gets shot in the back and still doesn't die.
Dude, Buck is this should be the story about Buck.
I know. I was like, fuck Buck. Like, damn. And he dies from a head injury. He goes to the hospital to go into surgery for the back shoot, which always cracks me up that like, they're like, we got you, shoot you. And they're like, uh-oh, let's get him to the hospital. I'm like, aren't you trying to kill him? At this point, they weren't, I don't think, because it's not until a bit later that they're like, we don't care how you get Bonnie and Clyde, shoot the fuckers. But anyways, Buck dies in the hospital from his head injury and pneumonia, and Blanche gets taken away because she deserves it. Run faster. Like, the bitches with the limps got away and Blanche didn't. I don't understand that. Like, I didn't dive deep enough to figure out exactly what she was doing, but I was like, Bonnie and Clyde are limping and they got away. So the next 6 weeks, they went off of normal territory. Like, they kind of would always stay in the same plains. They're both from Texas. So that started getting a little more iffy to go back to the Dallas area because they were expected there. So they go to Colorado, Minnesota, and Mississippi, continue to rob. And Bonnie and Clyde risk a visit to Dallas next to see some family. And the police were expecting that. And so I think they got one of their family members to like stand out and join in on an ambush and be like, we're here. And as they drove by, they sensed an ambush and didn't stop. They opened fire on them as they drove by, and both of their legs got brushed with bullets, but they were fine. I was like, I hope that was the bad legs. They're not like double limping. I don't know. The amount that they have all gotten shot is actually pretty impressive. I'm a little impressed. So where are we going? Okay, so January 16th, 1934, Clyde orchestrates a breakout from Eastham Prison. That's almost one of the reasons it has been cited, like, in the beginning that he even wanted to start robbing and stuff. Like, his whole goal was to go back and get some of his friends and people out of that prison and be like, fuck that. So they do that. There's an escape. I believe 5 inmates get out, and this attracts the full power of Texas and the federal government. And the manhunt for Bonnie and Clyde seriously begins. Then comes in former Texas Ranger Captain Frank Hammer. He was persuaded to come out of retirement to hunt them and become a Texas Highway Patrol. And there's an awesome movie on Netflix called The Highwaymen.
I was going to mention this later because
it's about him. It's really, it's Woody Harrelson, isn't it? It's really interesting, and it really goes like the next couple just little like bullet points I'm going to give you. It dives really deep into what he went through to catch Bonnie and Clyde, and really good movie. So
would you say that one is more historically accurate than the titular Bonnie and Clyde?
Yes, yeah, and it is much more historically accurate. So this guy is a tough ass and kind of known for doing things his way. He will kill and doesn't care. He's like, I will get them. He's credited 53 kills and has suffered 17 wounds himself. Again, like everything I read, I was just like, everyone has gotten shot. So many. It just goes back into, I was like, 17. He's been shot 17 times.
Bullets are just ricocheting off of them. Meanwhile,
and I'm like, one time I got a really bad bruise from doing aerial in the circus. Exactly. Like, shut up, Gelsey. You didn't get shot. Now I feel like I need to go out and get shot. Watch what you wish for. I'm knocking on wood.
Yeah,
let's not
make those wishes.
Let's not. I was just kidding. Universe.
Yeah, let's not put that in the universe. I love you too much.
So he initially lives in his car and stalks Bonnie and Clyde. He can never get enough and close enough to get them. He doesn't have enough manpower himself, but he's trying to figure out their patterns and how he's going to get them. And Easter Sunday, April 1st, 1934, which, by the way, I was like, whoa, Easter, April 1st. I guess we've had a couple Easters land in March. That seems so early for Easter. I just remember as a kid, Easter was always like the third Sunday. I was like, April 1st.
Yeah, it has, I forget. You'd think that someone who works at a church would know more of how we determine Easter, but I think it's like, it's based on some random, it's like X amount of weeks after this specific date. And depending on all of it, I don't know. I don't know. I'm speaking out my ass.
Okay. Side note, little anecdotal Gelsey thing, was raised Jewish, and I'm a non-practicing Jew now, but doesn't matter. But we celebrated Christmas and Easter because my mom was like, no, my kids are getting this. I was God, how old was I when I found out that Easter was a religious holiday? I was like, wait, this is about what? Who, what? I
Yeah.
had no idea.
It's about
I thought it was just
chocolates.
Easter.
The simplest standard definition of Easter is that it is the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or after the spring equinox.
Oh, that's right, because it's a solstice. Yeah, it was that first, so it makes sense that maybe it would kind of like go
Yeah.
around.
So if
We're
the
on
first
moon
full
cycles
moon,
with Easter?
yeah,
I was
so
not expecting that.
I didn't
Some witchy
either.
shit. Yeah.
That's some wild
They're
shit.
like, what's your star sign?
Happy Leo season, everybody.
We're gonna go back to these highwaymen. Who cares what Easter is? This is not about Easter. So they are in Grapevine, Texas, in the highway patrol. There's H.D. Murphy and Edward Bryant. They see a car stopped on the side of the road and they stop with their motorbikes to be like, what's going on here? And they're killed roadside because it was like, oh, it's the Barrow gang, at least the 3 remaining people. And these are considered the Grapevine murders. And these are the murders that get put into the press that kind of turn the public opinion against Bonnie and Clyde, where they're like, you killed our beloved H.D. Murphy and Edward Bryant. How dare you? I don't know why like this is the one that gets it, but
how dare you?
Yeah, they exaggerate this murder a lot in the press, and this is the first time that it's cited that there was a witness that they're like, Bonnie pulled the trigger, and now the press, people didn't necessarily think that she was doing the killings.
Yeah.
So then it was like, she's killing, and all of a sudden from this like tough ass holding a gun who they all praised, now it's like, ooh, these are not good people. So they're still on the run. There's like a huge bounty on both of them. I think there was a higher bounty on Bonnie actually because she was thought to have killed one of those guys. So they keep tracking the route. There's a tip that they are planning to visit Bienville Parish in Louisiana. So on May 21st, an ambush is set along the Louisiana State Highway on the 154. They're in place by 9 p.m. and they wait the whole next day. Everyone's like, what's going on? He's like, trust me, I have a hunch. And approximately at 9:15 a.m., May 23rd, the Ford V8 drove by and slowed for a truck that they placed on the side of the highway, which was placed there on purpose as a lull to get them in. I'm really good with words. They probably slowed down because they're like, ooh, someone to rob. And 6 lawmen opened fire. They never stopped fully because then they were like, oh shit. Clyde gets shot in the head almost immediately and dies. They fire 130 rounds. 112 of those bullets go into the car. Clyde had 17 wounds. Bonnie had 26 wounds. They both die. Word spreads and crazy fast. And actually, let's stop on the word. I have a little quotey quote from one of the officers that did the shooting.
Oh, boy.
This was made by Hinton and Alcorn, who were one of the 6. Each of us 6 officers had a shotgun and an automatic rifle and pistols. We opened fire with the automatic rifles. They were emptied before the car even got with us. Then we used shotguns. There was smoke coming from the car and it looked like it was on fire. After shooting the shotguns, we emptied the pistols at the car, which had passed us and ran into a ditch about 50 yards down the road. It almost turned over. We kept shooting at the car even after it stopped. We weren't taking any chances. Wow. So they were like, yeah, just, you get it.
Yeah.
I just lost my words. I was like, you get it. They're just
they were going for it.
So immediately a mob of people come, they get the dead bodies out, and people from all over start coming and grabbing anything they can off Bonnie and Clyde. A woman cuts a piece of Bonnie's hair to take. They're ripping clothing off. Coroner report that was said, nearly everyone had begun collecting souvenirs such as shell casings, slivers of glass from the shattered car windows, and bloody pieces of clothing from the garments of Bonnie and Clyde. One eager man had opened a pocket knife and reached into the car to cut off Clyde's left ear. It was also said that a man was trying to cut off Clyde's trigger finger to take, and he, I believe, was stopped. And they're like, get the fuck away.
Yeah,
like,
man,
it's like, this was the finger that pulled the whatever.
That's insane. Like,
and then, of course, they're going to like sell all of it. And it's just so much. Yeah. And the small town they were in was a population of 2,000 where they died. And in hours, it jumped up to 12,000. Stores sold out of food. Everyone wanted to go to see where Bonnie and Clyde had just been killed.
I don't think I realized that it was that big of a cultural, like this.
Huge.
This is like the 30s, like version
Kardashians.
Well, I was going to, I mean, I guess that's probably more, I was going to say like the white Bronco chase. You know what I mean? Like it just like captivated the world essentially for a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was insane to read that. Like the public was really obsessed with them and they kind of went, remember there's no reality TV shows. So this is what they got.
Yeah, and it's the Great Depression. They're not really getting any entertainment going on in their
No,
lives.
they're not, and they're pretty fucking depressed. So it's just any distraction is a great one. So thank you, Bonnie and Clyde.
It would have been a lot different if they had like the honeymooners back then or something.
Maybe Bonnie and Clyde would have watched that instead of killing, and there wouldn't be all these deaths.
Yeah.
If Bonnie and Clyde had some good sitcoms and therapy, wow.
Yeah. We wouldn't even be doing this podcast. It'd all be done.
So I'm glad that didn't exist because I'd have nothing to talk about. Bonnie and Clyde wanted to be buried together, but they were not. I believe it was Bonnie's family that was like new. And where was the number? I know that her funeral, like so many people showed up. Like I want to say it was like 20,000.
But Clyde got buried with Buck, right?
Yes, Clyde got buried, and they did a private funeral, so no one was there, but Bonnie's was quite the spectacle. And then their car, I think it was the woman that initially owned it, who was stolen from, went through the insurance and was like, that's my car. You have to give it back to me. And so they gave her the car, and then she immediately turned around and sold it for like a shit ton of money because it has all the bullet holes and this, that. And I don't know if it's still there to this day, but at least within the last 5 years, 10 years, the car is on display in Prim Valley at one of the casinos on your way to Vegas. So I think it's at I don't think it's at Buffalo Bills. It might be it's there. And I was like, oh shit. Like living in Vegas, that drive from California to Vegas, I pass Prim all the time. And I was like, I want to stop and see the car with all the bullet holes. That's really cool.
Did you ever stop?
No, I want to just get home. Yeah. When I was a kid, we stopped there a lot, but I didn't know who Bonnie and Clyde was when I was really little. And there was a log ride and a roller coaster. And so I did that instead. Because children, I'm a child. So that's the good old Bonnie and Clyde. Don't cut off your big toes, ladies and gentlemen, and go to therapy.
It is mind-blowing
and heartbreaking
how many original scripts are written every year but are never made.
So we seek out these scripts and bring them to life with full audio production and professional actors.
Check us out at Undiscovered Scripts.
Movies made of paper.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Free!
Gelsey, I've just been assuming that you've seen the movie Bonnie and Clyde from the 60s. Have you never seen the movie Bonnie and Clyde?
I've never seen it. You were talking about it earlier, and I was like, I don't want to say that I haven't seen it. I was going to watch it this week, and I just got so busy with work.
So it's fine. It's a very good... I would say it's more of an important movie than it is a particularly good movie. Like, it's well made. It's interesting. It's it did a lot of incredible things. It's kind of the kickoff of the new Hollywood in the late 60s into the 70s. But I was going to ask you about some things in the movie, but that doesn't seem necessary. So I was just going to tell you that my experience of seeing that movie for the first time was in film class in college, and I've probably only seen it like 3 or 4 times since then.
That's probably why I haven't seen it, because I didn't go to film class in college.
Yeah, see, you went to New York and just went right into the dancing.
I just was tip-tapping away, yeah.
At the end of the day, Bonnie and Clyde has probably inspired more characters in movies than we can count. I feel like anytime that you have a guy and a girl anti-hero, it immediately gets, oh, it's kind of like Bonnie and Clyde. Oh, they're the Bonnie and Clyde of the 90s. They're like, it's so if you had to pick one like Bonnie and Clyde inspired duo.
Ooh. Sometimes
and if you want to
really
go
hard
first,
questions, you go first. Sometimes you throw really hard questions.
So one of my favorite movies, and I feel like this probably isn't fully Bonnie and Clyde, but whatever. One of my all-time favorite movies is True Romance, written by Quentin Tarantino with Christian Slater. And that one to me is, that one really captures what I think we romanticize Bonnie and Clyde as, because they really aren't killing innocent bystanders in that movie. They're just killing drug lords. So it's like that's the version that we want to believe, that like Bonnie and Clyde were these misunderstood kids that got caught up in a crazy situation, but they were killing just the bad guys and like everything was okay. So I really love that one. I think that that's the big one for me.
That's funny that you said that, because that just gave me my answer. And I'm going to go with Tarantino didn't direct it, but I believe he wrote it.
I know what
Yeah,
you're
Oliver
about to
Stone
say.
directed it, and it's Natural Born Killers.
Of course it is. Yep.
I mean, come on. That movie's crazy. In the pandemic, my dad and I watched every single Tarantino film, even if like we'd seen it, but there was a bunch. Like I'd never seen this one. I'd never seen, what is it? Death Trap? Not Death Trap.
Oh, Death Proof. Death Proof.
Death Proof. Sorry. Death Trap's a different movie, which is.
Oh, you
also
would
great,
love
like
Death
cocaine.
Proof. I'm like kind
I've
of.
seen it. I've seen it. No. I'm saying I hadn't before.
No, that's
so
what I'm
we
saying. I
watched...
imagine you loved it. That seems like such a Gelsey movie.
I loved it. And From Dusk Till Dawn, we watched like all of them. Oh my God. Death Proof was, and one of my favorite...
As a stunt woman, like that is
one
like
of my favorite stunt women,
you.
Zoe Bell. She plays herself, Zoe, in it. She did all the stunts for Kill Bill and stuff, so I've followed her career. But I absolutely fucking loved that movie. It was great. But yeah, Natural Born Killers we watched, and I was like, and I can't believe how young Robert Downey Jr. is in it, and it's quite a crazy all over the place movie. But it's Juliette Lewis is phenomenal.
I need
in
to
it, just
rewatch
playing that
it.
crazy like. Oh, she's so good in it.
I saw it when I was a teenager and I didn't like it. And I have literally not watched it for 20 years. So I feel like I need to give it a second shot. Like,
yeah, I would try it again. It's definitely an out there film. So
yeah, I think just 17 is a little too young to really process what that movie is saying and doing. So I think
there's been a handful of movies that I watched as a teen that I was like, I don't like this. And as an adult, I've rewatched. I'm like, oh, this is great. So yeah.
So Gelsey, if people wanted to tell us about their favorite versions of Bonnie and Clyde in pop culture, where can they go and do that?
Yes, please tell us on Instagram. You can find us at @BeforeMyTime_podcast or on Facebook. Just search Before My Time. Let us know who your favorite modern Bonnie and Clyde duo are. And while you're here, why don't you just go ahead and give us a 5-star review? Because that would be sure and swell. That way we don't have to go around and never mind. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Go to therapy, kids. Okay, bye.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.